Hello and welcome to How Customers Should Prioritize HR Tech Investments. Today's exciting webinar is produced by Actual Tech Media and presented in partnership with HR Tech advisor Steve Goldberg, who I will tell you a bit more about in just a moment. My name is Jess Steinbach with Actual Tech Media, and I am absolutely thrilled to be your moderator for this discussion today. Now, a few years ago, we all experienced a dramatic and drastic change in how we define a workplace and how we support our workforce. And all of a sudden, things that seemed optional became a necessity. Solutions that were previously nice to have were catapulted up to the top of that to-do list. But look, everyone in this audience knows that this intense spotlight on HR tools and technologies does not mean that they are new on the scene. This field has been innovating and growing for years. But now, with these rapid changes to workforce engagement and workplace structure, a lot of you may have the encouragement and, best of all, the resources to create new or potentially grow and scale the HR technology environment that you have always dreamed of. But okay, there's a lot of solutions out there, and the sheer volume of choice could feel a bit overwhelming. So where do we start? And that's the good news, folks, because today we have partnered with HR tech influencer, thought leader, author, speaker, and just all around incredible expert, Steve Goldberg. Steve is here to help us navigate this important conversation and help you decide where and how to prioritize your organization's investment in HR tech. Now, there is so much to cover here today, and honestly, I don't want to take a single minute away from the discussion. So I'm just going to zip through a few of those important housekeeping points, and we'll get us on our way here. Okay, so to start, I want to point out two important things. First, I'm going to draw your attention to the questions section of that webinar console. Now, the absolute best part of a webinar like this is the chance to ask questions directly of an expert like Steve, who will be joining us here in just a moment. And I know that today's session will get all of your brains fired up, so be sure to get those questions in that console. And since I know there will be a lot today, I do want to remind you that if we're unable to get to your question during the live session, don't worry. Actual Tech Media and Steve will be following up with you after the webinar wraps. A quick reminder that that questions console is also a great place to say hi to your friends in the Actual Tech Media community, so be sure to reach out, give them a virtual wave if you haven't already. And that is also the best place to let us know if you do have any technical issues during the session today. Knock on wood, of course. I do want to remind you that a browser refresh is going to get rid of any of the usual tech gremlins, but if they're particularly persistent today, shoot us a message in that questions console and we'll be there to help. Okay, now, as you remember, I said there were two important things I wanted to point out in your webinar console. So the first one was the questions tab. The second one is right there next to it. It's that handout section. Now, you're going to see some exciting content to go along with the webinar today, including a link to the Gorilla Guide book club and the Actual Tech Media webinar calendar with all kinds of awesome upcoming webinars that you can register for after we wrap today. Plus, you can reach out to Steve. So you'll find all of that right there in the handouts tab. Be sure to check that out and explore throughout the webinar. And hey, it's not just awesome content that we're giving away today. We also have a $300 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, you must be in attendance during the live webinar to qualify for that prize. And all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're saying to yourself, I don't know what those are, no stress. Head on back to that handouts tab, scroll on down to the bottom, and you'll find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but we absolutely love your questions. I want to be 100% clear about that. We love it. In fact, we love it so much that today we're actually giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to the best question asked. Now, I do want to remind you that we are reviewing all the questions asked after the webinar. So even if we don't get to your question during the live Q&A, don't worry, there's still a chance to win. Okay, well, I told you we would keep it short and sweet, and we did, and we're going to jump right into the webinar now. I am so excited to introduce you all to our expert presenter today. Steve Goldberg is a top-tier, globally recognized HR tech influencer and thought leader, in large part because he's been operating on all sides of HR, HCM, and HR tech for over 3 decades. So basically, he is one fascinating human, and I can't wait for you all to meet him. So let's bring Steve out, say hi. He can tell us a little bit more about himself and our session today. Hi, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks to everybody for joining. I know you can do an awful lot with an hour of your day, so I really appreciate you taking the time and spending an hour with us. And Jess, boy, that was amazing. I've never, heard an introduction like that preceding you before, so thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, you deserve it, Steve, and I can't wait to get into the session today. I know you've got some amazing content to cover, so I'm going to step away. Take it away, Steve.
All right. Take care, Jess. See you later. All right, thanks everybody again for joining. So what are we talking about today? The plan is as follows. I will actually be sharing a few frameworks with you today, one on AI and HCM, specifically kind of what I call use case categories. I have another framework on the employee journey. And the first one I'm going to show, which is the very next slide, which I'll get to in a second, is intended to allow you to kind of look in the mirror and go, this is what my organization is all about. This is my operating context from which I can then use that to navigate the hundreds of options out there and kind of boil it down to what is the best fit given my operating context. So you'll see the framework in a second. You'll get what I mean. And I basically, just to preview it for a second, based on my experiences, as Jess said, I've operated on all sides. I use the phrase diversity of lenses. And I've really tried to bring that diversity of lenses to bear in this talk. And so one of the kind of byproducts of that was thinking about all the customer organizations I've worked with over the years. It's actually almost 40 years now. And I kind of grouped them into 4 general profiles that kind of reflect their proclivities, their characteristics, and how those would manifest in a buy decision, in an evaluation decision. So we're going to get to that framework. Then, again, the diversity of lenses. I'm going to bring some of that to the forefront in terms of lenses that I used when I was a buyer. I was a buyer in the US and a global buyer of HR tech in Europe. Spent 4 years with a family in Europe. I mostly spent time in financial services and investment banking on Wall Street, in HR, reporting to heads of HR, CHROs. That was 15 years of my career. And then I crossed over to the vendor side. And some people know me from my years heading up product strategy at PeopleSoft, global spokesperson for PeopleSoft. I then founded an applicant tracking software company. And really for the last 15 years, mostly operating in the analyst and advisor realm, advising both customers and HCM solution vendors. So I'm going to distill all those perspectives down to 10 vendor evaluation lenses, as it were, that I used. HR tech outcomes, if we don't think about the underlying dependencies in the outcomes we're aspiring to achieve, then it's not highly likely that you're going to get those desired outcomes. So I always think about outcomes and dependencies, kind of juxtaposition the two. 3 minutes of change management. So one thing that I learned early on in my 20s when I was running HR systems for an investment bank is that I better know a lot about change management, and I didn't when I started out. So I became a student of change management, and I read books by Lewin and the Prosky Change Management Institute and Cotter. And again, I tried to extract what would be real practical that I could apply readily. And I'm going to kind of give you the benefit of picking up on a few pointers that took me kind of years to get my head wrapped around. And I distilled it down to one slide. Innovations are plenty. There's far too many for us to cover, but I am going to spend some time again on another framework. I alluded to it before, the AI and HCM framework. And I think you'll appreciate some of the depth of that framework because I really talk about specific use cases across every core HR process and strategic talent management area. And then I kind of overlay on top of that this framework of AI and HCM, which is essentially 5 categories of use cases, what I call the 3 Ps: personalize, predict, and prescribe. and then understand and curate. So those are the 5 categories, and you'll see specific use cases relative to each of the core HR process areas. Final thoughts, and then as Jess aptly said, we'll get into the Q&A. Okay, so again, nobody as an individual fits into a box. Organizations, certainly a collection of individuals, don't fit into a box very neatly. But based on the really hundreds of organizations I've dealt with, certainly got to interact with a lot as a vendor. And people saw I've had 2,000 customers way back then. But also, I'm working with 50 or 60 HCM vendors over the past 5 years. Not currently, but over the past 5 years. Currently, probably about 8 to 10. Because I've decided to scale back a little bit at my age and stage. In any event, but these 4 boxes constitute general profiles. And by that I mean, so what are the, kind of tendencies, characteristics, and what are the drivers of different types of organizations? Yeah, we could have come up with 6, 8, or 10, so it's a little bit arbitrary, but to me this made sense. So I'm going to cover these 4 kind of profiles of organizations with the goal being that a listener here gets to know a little bit more about themselves, because you get to start with that operating context in order to go out and successfully navigate all of the options out there. So let's get right into it. What I'm going to do is go through the 4 and go really left to right horizontally and kind of amplify just the words you see on top and describe what are some of the characteristics and proclivities and tendencies of organizations that fit into those 4. Now, by the way, organizations can be in more than one box at the same time, A, and B, you could also view this as kind of an evolutionary path that organizations are taking or aspire to take. So there's different ways you could look at this, but I think you get the point. So what I described as the foundational profile of HR tech buyers and customers has the following kind of attributes or drivers, right? They're focused heavily, generally speaking, again, everything is generally speaking here, on reducing costs, on getting and capturing efficiency gains, access to more data and better data. We're talking about people data, and we're talking about kind of the intermingling of people data with non-HR data, maybe finance data. So those are some of the kind of general, dynamics and characteristics of what's going on, the drivers in the foundational group. Then you have process optimizers. So we're talking about HR processes here. And they tend, based on, again, my years in this space, they tend to focus on, well, let's define the process. Let's scope out the process. What are the inputs? What are the outputs? What are the desired outcomes? How do processes link together? As an example, performance management is an input to compensation. It's also an input to learning. And you can also go in the other direction. You can say, well, we've done an assessment of competencies, and there are some gaps. So we're going to go in the other direction and say, when we're recruiting, we're going to make sure that we address some of those gaps when we're doing workforce planning. So it's almost a circular sort of relationship between these processes. And the integration piece is very, very important. And we're not just talking about integrated talent management. It's a phrase that's been bandied about for a while. Integrated talent management, as I was just kind of articulating, performance, learning, and comp. There's kind of logical connection points between those. But there's also integration between employees and non-employees, or gig workers, or contractors. If you really want to have a holistic view of the workforce, where are we as an industry in terms of solutions that are giving a line of sight into both employees and non-employees? I would say we're still in kind of a nascent period, but I think I think customers and buyers are exerting a lot of pressure on HR tech vendors to be able to flex their tech and their offerings so that customers can get a holistic view of the workforce, employees and non-employees. Then you have the EX employee experience focused profile, as I've kind of demarcated it here. Obviously, just as the words imply, deliver a superior employee experience. Why? Why is that important? Why do you get zillions of results when you do a Google search on employee experience? Because it's arguably the hottest topic. It's been the hottest topic in HR, HCM, HR tech for probably 3 years now. Interestingly, around the same time that we've been dealing with the so-called COVID era, and the Great Resignation, and employees having more agency and more choice, and kind of a shift taking place in terms of employees really kind of architecting their own careers and so forth. So it's been really critical for customer organizations and the partners on the vendor side to really think through what are all the dimensions of an employee experience. Yes, so some of the ones that come to mind in terms of capabilities: internal mobility, well-being, total well-being, which includes mental health, certainly investment in development and professional growth, and culture. And what's the culture of the organization? Is it a culture that I want to be associated with? Is it a culture that I feel good coming to work, virtually or physically, and being part of? So, the last 3 years we've seen a real burgeoning of this in terms of emphasis in people's minds. And what are the outcomes when you deliver a great employee experience? I use an acronym, a different kind of an alternative ERP acronym. In this case, it stands for engagement, retention, and productivity. And if you think about productivity and driving productivity, and I've been using this kind of example since my PeopleSoft days 20 years ago, but if you just think in very simple math, right? Just think about an organization of 5,000 employees. To keep the numbers simple, let's say the revenue per employee is 100,000 US per employee. If they elevate productivity, improve productivity by a mere 5%, so we've gone from 100,000 revenue per employee to 105,000, and they have 5,000 employees, that's 5,000 times 5,000. That's 25 million in value creation from improving productivity just 5%. So that is very kind of organically tied to delivering a great employee experience. Employees are charged up at work, they're highly engaged, that leads to productivity related outcomes. And like I said, development, growth, listening to employees, keeping a finger on the pulse of employees, things like diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. So I know I'm spending a lot of time on that, and it's because it deserves it. And that's why HR tech vendors, HCM, HXM vendors are spending a lot of time on it too, and it's reflected in their roadmaps. And finally, the last group, and again, many organizations will have characteristics that fit in each of these. So this is kind of a general profiling, and profiling has its pluses and minuses in general. So the talent innovators, HCM talent innovators, what are we talking about there? I kind of used the word before, agency, and the ability to self-direct and be the architect of your own career. Line manager enablement, why do I have that there? Because, think about it, the HR department generally accounts for 1% of the organization. So you have 1%, give or take, fractional percentages of the organization that's supposed to really be in touch with the needs, interests, and goals of every employee. It's impossible. They cannot scale to that extent. And that's why line managers, and there's a universal recognition that line managers are so critical if you want to drive engagement, retention, and productivity. If you want to have a culture that's going to attract and retain top talent, line managers are super critical. And the broader line of sight into what's impacting employees, what's even impacting candidates, and also what's impacting line managers. So that's that layer of profile details. Now let's go to some of the solution capabilities Again, there's many that kind of line up under each of these verticals, if you will. So I use the expression in the first foundational group, I use the expression platform attributes. It's just a term I use really mostly to distinguish it from features and functionality. Keep in mind that in this cloud era, multi-tenancy, SaaS cloud era, you're having much more frequent releases. In the old days when my teams were implementing HR tech, cloud didn't exist. You'd get a release every 2 to 3 years. You would hope that some of the functionality and business requirements that you had maybe would be showing up in that release. And if they weren't, you had to wait another 2 or 3 years. Much, much different situation now. You have releases coming out fast and furious in the cloud era. And you're basically dealing with a standard code line with configuration tools to adapt it to some of the unique needs of the business. So when I talk about platform attributes, I'm talking about interoperability, configurability, scalability, right? Interoperability, configurability, scalability, and the all-important usability. So these abilities, I just want to make this really, underscored. These abilities or these platform attributes arguably are the hardest for a vendor to change in short order. If a particular offering doesn't get high marks on performance or the user experience, usability, or interoperability, its ability to smoothly integrate with other systems assets in the organization, with external content in the world of compensation, bringing in market data, market pay data. If the system is not allowing that to happen in a really kind of a smooth way, in a low friction way, it's going to be a while, but frankly, in my experience, before that system is going to be able to do that. So platform attributes, they do change over time, but they take the longest to change. And, I have that discussion with anybody that disagrees. And also in the foundational group, most organizations, or many, will say, well, if you don't get payroll right, we don't have a mandate and a remit to do anything else. So I agree with that statement, but I'll also say that I've never heard of an organization that ascended the ranks within their industry sector because they did payroll better than anybody else. Yeah, clearly you want regulatory compliance, you want accurate paychecks, you want to be able to answer employee questions, and you could be really excellent in that, top notch. But again, are you going to ascend the ranks within your industry? I'm not playing down the importance of payroll. I'm just saying that's why I personally have focused with vendors and with end customers on the foundation, and then what are the movers? What's going to move the dial? Where's the strategic value coming from? And by the way, payroll is also a source of strategic value, but we can talk about that at another time. The process optimizers, what are some of the solution capabilities that come to mind? Best of breed. If the pain points and the business priorities relate to bringing in talent, certainly a recruiting technology or talent acquisition product kind of fits into that context, or maybe that there's a shift that's needed in skills and competencies. Why? You're going into a new line of business. Maybe you have baby boomers like me retiring, and you got to get people up to speed more quickly. And that's, that would lend itself to a best of breed in the learning space. Or perhaps an organization, a global organization, spending an awful lot on compensation, and the 3% increase or a 4% increase is not really generating the sort of outcomes in terms of retention. So we have to start making other types of decisions, like, do we trade off base salary dollars for variable comp dollars and give people a chance to have a higher total comp opportunity? So then you would be looking at a compensation solution. So when we talk about the process optimizers, they're typically looking at one process more than others, but they're also looking at the integration of these various HCM, strategic HCM, and talent management processes. The third group, the employee experience focus, what kind of solution capabilities are they looking at? career pathing, right? Career management, allowing an employee to assess, to get to this point in my career, to get from accountant to junior controller to controller in X period of time. What do I have to do in terms of skills, upskilling myself, etc. Now, it's not just learning courses. There might be coaching, mentoring involved, and frankly, if the gap between where I need to be from a competency standpoint and what my career goals are, if that gap is a bit too wide, maybe I could think about branching into other career paths. So this is more employee experience focused. Those are sort of capabilities. You'll see some words where I use the red font. Those tie to the framework I'm going to show you in terms of AI and HCM. And personalization is one of the most important, let's say, capabilities or functionalities that you're going to get from AI, more specifically machine learning in the HCM realm. You could have personalized learning. You can have a personalized approach to how you're dealing with candidates. You could personalize rewards. So the more personalization, there's a clear correlation with improving the employee experience. But I'll come back to personalization and the other words you see in red on the right, prescribe and predict and so forth. So that's where the talent innovators are looking for those sort of capabilities. Let employees connect with each other, let them share expertise with each other, resources with each other, learn from each other, mentors, coaches, etc. So this is my framework for how organizations really need to understand their own home base, their own operating context, and then they could go out and start, purveying all of the options out there. All right. So as I said, part of the plan here is to look at vendor evaluation lenses. These are all the ones I've used. I'm going to go through them quickly. So there's about there are 10 of them here, right? How does a vendor or prospective vendor value your business? I once had a boss, a CHRO boss, say to me, Steve, the fact that they're willing to discount. In those days, it was an on-premise solution. Now it would be cloud, subscription, per employee per month, et cetera. But the fact that they're willing to discount, that is not really a significant expression of valuing your business. I was told that back then, and I totally believe it today. So what are the expressions and manifestations of valuing your business? Second one, understanding the nuances. Understanding the nuances of your business. What changes in your business What changes are your business going through? Changes in business plans and priorities. Alignment of values and vision with your prospective vendor. Alignment of values. There are some vendors, HR tech vendors, that lead with values. In the mid-market, I could think of, and by the way, I'm really not. As I said somewhere in one of the slides, this is not about specific vendors, but just as an illustrative example, when I think of a vendor let's say that focuses more on the mid-market that leads with values, UKG comes to mind. When I think of an HR tech vendor or supplier in the enterprise market, the large market space that leads with values, SuccessFactors comes to mind. Does that mean that these vendors have something better to offer? Not necessarily. I'm just saying that their positioning and messaging. And the second part of this is how does this solution tie? What's the linkage between technology capabilities today and what's in the roadmap back to the vision and the values? So that's the important part, and that's still probably as much of a journey for the two vendors I mentioned as anybody else. But the fact that they lead with values to me is really, really important. It's a good predictor that if you're in that group that focuses on things like mental health and total well-being and the voice of the employee, leading with values is a good. It's a good place to be for a vendor, and it's a good place to be for a customer. demonstrable linkage between the two, as I've already said, and the emphasis over platform attributes, not features. And again, it's the reason is what I said before, emphasizing platform attributes because they take longer to change. If the user experience is a 4 on a 10 scale, it's not going to be an 8 or a 9 in the next year or so. So just bear that in mind. If you have a vendor, an HR tech vendor partner that's real transparent with you about what's being done to move up in terms of the quality and efficacy of a user experience or the scalability of the product, or et cetera. As long as they're transparent with you, then, of course, as we know in work and in life and with vendor relationships, transparency is really key. Setting expectations is really key. Having you be part of the process. How long is it going to take? What are we going to do to get there? All really important to sustain a vendor relationship. The next 5 are as follows. I already mentioned 6. What's the target market for a vendor? Most vendors, if not all, will say there is a target market. I'm sure they're saying it internally, and many of them will say it, be forthcoming and say it when they're interacting with prospects. Your industry happens to be the industry that we focus on. Your population of non-exempts is who we focus on. You're a global organization. We deal with global, large market, enterprise market in these 3 verticals. Target market alignment, really important. And the proof points are equally important. Proof points are not just that we have critical mass of customers in that vertical. It's that we understand the vertical, that we're delivering results. There's customer success stories with real tangible proof points. 8.1, I say it a little bit in jest. The 8th one, the vendor should not be too far ahead of their skis with respect to their marketing. Yes, kind of in the 15 years I spent as an HR tech buyer, clearly there was a pattern that one can discern. And the pattern was marketing typically leads product, but how far ahead is it? I'd say 1 year is reasonable. Stretch it to 18 months. I could live with that. If marketing and messaging and positioning is not manifested in the product or won't be for 2 or 3 years, I personally have some discomfort around that. Customer success model includes things like, putting you in touch with the right customers, having you giving you a platform for inputting to the product roadmap. And speaking of roadmaps, I have a couple of points there on roadmaps, and maybe the one in the middle is is the question that I would recommend everybody to ask. Now, certainly vendors, if and when they show you a product roadmap, and most of them will, it's typically very high level because they know things change, and there's always disclaimers on the roadmap. But you're totally within your right to ask a vendor or prospective vendor, how's your execution against the last 2 roadmaps? And if you didn't kind of come to market with those enhanced capabilities and new functionality, what happened? It's a legitimate question. And there may be totally legitimate answers for what happened. So that's one question. Another question that I think is really pivotal, and when I ran product management or product strategy at PeopleSoft, it's something that I totally immersed myself in. And that's the product roadmap process. We wanted the process to be defensible and rational. Why? Because when the sales team is out there and selling to a customer, that customer needs to understand that there's a possibility that the roadmap is going to change, but they don't want to have a fear that the next really large customer is going to hijack the roadmap. And that was something that I dealt with. Even though I was working in prestigious financial services firms, it could always be a much more prestigious and a bigger firm with that would present a bigger revenue opportunity to the vendor partner. So I wanted to see evidence that the product roadmap process was rational and defensible. And I know this is an eye chart, so don't even worry if you can't see this. I just want to show you what we use. It was years ago, but I work with vendors that are still using what we developed at PeopleSoft back then. And it's really an R&D prioritization process, if you will, because you get all these inputs from analysts, from customers, from market leaders, from thought leaders. You get all and of course, feedback on your existing products, where the gaps are, where the opportunities are. And at the end of the day, the product management organization may have literally hundreds of ideas. Some of them would involve creating a new product. Others are, beefing up functionality in an existing product. So we developed a framework. What's in yellow is ultimately what we thought we could execute on in the next release. But more importantly, up on top, this was our process. We said, look, what are the three most important corporate objectives? They were, as a vendor, so I'm just giving you kind of a glimpse into the vendor's process because it's important that I think you know it as a buyer. So what are the corporate goals? Well, in this case for us, and they're probably fairly universal, they were, drive revenue in target markets, make sure you're retaining customers, that customer retention is high. And from an infrastructure delivery standpoint, developing product, supporting that product, that you have a lot of efficiencies in that infrastructure. Those were the three, we were a product organization, so all three of those were relevant. But we also added two other dimensions and did weighted scoring on those. And they were kind of the investment return ratio, which I'll get to in a second on the right. And also, sometimes this is shortchanged or just totally forgotten about. What's really our ability to execute? What's our ability to build a product for the trucking industry? What's our ability to take a domestic solution and globalize it? And vendors, the best product vendors look at that with a real critical eye when they're thinking about that. The right hand side, very quickly, I just say, a vendor needs to manage a product roadmap and those buckets of items. And here, what I didn't say, and I'll say it now. So when you have those hundreds of items, enhancements to existing product, new verticals, new markets, and totally new kind of experimental ideas with new product innovation, you have to, in order to make this a manageable process, you have to logically group them somehow. So when you have those groupings, to me, you need to manage it as a vendor like an asset portfolio, right? So you have front-loaded investment and you have back-loaded investment. Similarly, front-loaded revenue, back-loaded revenue. Now, I know most people on this that tuned in today were not expecting that to be covered, but I think it's important that buyers have a way of assessing that their prospective vendor partner has a solid and rational and defensible product roadmap process. I think it's one of the most important things. So here's another one. I guess you can call this a framework. I developed this slide specifically for this talk over the past weekend. I give it a lot of thought. And so x-axis is the value of certain HR, HCM, HXM outcomes. What's the value of those sort of outcomes? And the y-axis is, again, dependencies. In order to, are there major hurdles to cross? Are there major potential impediments? Are they operational? Are they process-related, technology-related, people-related, competency, skills, etc.? There can be a whole raft of different types of dependencies. So let's look at the right-hand side. For my money, I would advocate that organizations, both on the customer side of the coin and the vendor side of the coin, think about those outcomes on the right. Far right. Why? Because that's where I believe the value proposition is greatest. And as you can see, we're only talking about low to mid-level dependencies. So my big three for the last few years have been the same. Drive organizational agility. In a period of max fluidity, an organization gets super levels of degrees of competitive advantage if they can be agile. And agile is not just nimble. It's not just being able to shift and pivot. It is that, but it's also knowing. An intelligent organization knows what their options are and knowing what the best option is. And that's my term that I have in quotes is called adaptive HCM. It's the ability to be out in front of both business risks and business opportunities with the best workforce-related actions and decisions. And how do you do that? You do that by picking up on cues and signals. What's coming out of exit interviews? What do the Glassdoor ratings show? What are check-ins? What are the key themes and check-ins from a technology innovation standpoint in recent, for the last 5+ years? Sentiment analysis is one of the ways that AI is used. What are the words and topics that are coming up in anonymized fashion in emails and discussion boards internally? So adaptive HCM org agility, look, if you don't have organizational agility, then you're not going to be able to get into a new market with a reasonable degree of confidence. You're not going to be able to execute a corporate restructuring or M&A or roll out new products or just restructure the organization because you think it'll be better from a delivery standpoint. If you're going to do it, it's going to be high risk and it's going to take a long time. So organizational agility, again, with the annals of corporate literature are littered with those that failed at it and those that succeeded. The one that I always highlight is IBM in the 80s, going from the biggest mainframe company manufacturer to one of the biggest professional services consulting firms in the world. All right, they had to be supremely agile for that. They had to know things like skills adjacencies, skills equivalencies. If you know this, that means you should have skill transferability and be able to go into a new role. So what's on the other side of the coin in terms of some of the examples of failure or certainly suboptimal execution relative to organizational agility? Well, let's say a BlackBerry would be one. Blockbuster would be another. Blockbuster, a business model revolving around late fees was not going to last too long. So next one, deliver a great employee experience. I already touched upon that. And that kind of numbers example I gave you around productivity relates to the third one. So to me, that's the holy grail in terms of outcomes. Yes, it's subjective. Call me biased. I plead bias here. But I'm doing this around 40 years, and organizations that are aligning with those sort of strategic goals relative to the workforce tend to be the ones that have sustained success and attract and retain the best talent. Also on the right-hand side, you see some of the others: manage change, actionable people insights. These are all great outcomes. The ones that are higher up, in my mind, based on my experience, there's more dependencies: operational, process-related, technology-related, skills, competencies related. In the middle, cost savings and efficiency gains. As I mentioned earlier, I use what I call the Goldberg Ascension test. If you could save money by doing X, is that going to allow you most likely to ascend the ranks within your industry sector? Probably not. Still really important, because saving money and getting efficiency gains, first of all, efficiency gains will definitely contribute to better process outcomes, some of which are on the right-hand side. And cost savings will give you the budget to fund some of the strategic initiatives that you want to fund. So I'm not at all marginalizing the importance of cost savings and efficiency gains. I'm just kind of demarcating that it's the stuff on the right that tends to move the dial. And then you have others on the left that I'm not going to spend too much time on. All right. So I've used this slide over the years. Look, technology is not a magic bullet. We know this. And these are all the other dependencies. Speaking of dependencies, you can see some of them are operational, data related. The data model, is data accurate? Is it reliable? And do we have a strategy, integrated strategy around talent management? And the one that I've circled there is change management. And I'm going to move right to that. Because I said at the outset, I'm going to give you a glimpse into some of what I learned early in my career when I had no choice. I mean, I wanted to do it, but if I didn't, with the team that worked with me, really get to understand what were the hallmarks and key components of a change management program, we were not going to succeed with rolling out new HR technology to thousands of employees and managers. So bookends of change management. First one is on the left side. You don't see it here, but I'll get to the right side in a second. Bookends of change management, generally speaking, are organizational readiness. Assess the readiness for change. On the other side of that continuum is sustain the change. Both are very, very important. Organizational readiness, one of the models that I really took a liking to was the Boston Consulting Group model of ready, willing, and able. And what does it mean? Ready means that employees understand the reason for the change. Understand the reason for the change. They don't have to necessarily support it, and if they don't support it, they're not willing. So to be ready and willing, they have to understand the reason for it intellectually, and they are very supportive of it. So maybe they're thinking about the big picture as opposed to how's it going to affect my role. So that's the willing. And able is I'm ready to sign up. I'm going to have a role. It's going to be an important role in the context of that change, whatever it might be. And a change could be, again, going into a new market, new product line. It could be restructuring, M&A. Speaking of M&A, that's what's on the right-hand side. So I didn't mention this before, but one of my corporate HR jobs was working for Mr. Wayne Huizenga, the late Wayne Huizenga, who happened to found Blockbuster and AutoNation and Waste Management, Inc. And I ran the HR M&A group because Wayne did hundreds of acquisitions. Only spent a year and a half there right before I went to PeopleSoft, but it was M&A on steroids. And I applied some of this, change management learning that I did over the years. And one of the things I learned is when a deal is announced, but you can also say when new HR technology is being announced in terms of being rolled out, there's a period of destabilization that starts. And what does that mean? People start to worry about the implications for their own job, their own career, their pocketbook. They're thinking about, well, do I need to get a new resume? Am I going to have a new boss? There's a period of distraction. Distraction means productivity wanes. So how do you compress that period of destabilization? Communication. The communication kind of amplitude is how much distraction, if not, I'll use the word hysteria, is going on. Communication is going to bring that down. How do you compress it in terms of the time of destabilization? Through a very proven, effective change management program with milestones, key performance indicators, etc. I'm going to speed up a little bit here. So I'm going to segue to customer sat. I'm going to spend another 5 minutes and then we'll take questions. So customer sat in HR tech historically and today, not the area that garners the highest marks. And what I have on the right-hand side, I was at Burson back, worked with Josh and some other great analysts 12 years ago, 2010. And we did the customer sat study. Yeah, customer sat was kind of Midland at best. And lo and behold, it's still not great. PwC, is it terrible? No. But when you have almost 40% saying they're likely to change, that you can intuit or infer that customer sat or not such great customer sat is at play there. However, it's my contention that a driver, if not a big driver of customer sat, is customers themselves. So here's an example where this is a PwC slide. Top 10 HR challenges today, and one of them is dealing with tracking and managing remote workers and a hybrid workforce. That's one of the challenges. And yet, if you look at the right, monitoring remote productivity and performance, or monitoring the productivity and performance of remote workers, it's in the minority in terms of percentage of organizations that have a program and a process and are collecting the right data, and they have the right infrastructure to monitor the productivity and performance of remote workers. So if it's one of the top 10 priorities, but they don't even have kind of the baseline infrastructure to be able to address that priority, you can't go back and say it's my HR technology. Well, you can, but you're kidding yourself, in my opinion. So I think these slides are going to be available, and I've taken a little too much time on some slides, but this is my AI and HCM framework. I already mentioned The 3 Ps: predict, personalize, prescribe, understand, and curate. And I'm kind of giving away IP here. So I took some time in the last few years to look at, along the left-hand side, the key areas of HR HCM, and then look at examples, use cases of AI/machine learning in HCM. And you could see, in learning, you want to personalize learning. And when you talk about personalized learning, well, different things can be personalized: the content, the medium that's used, the pace of learning. So I'm going to go fast here, but I think you're getting the point. Workforce management and payroll, same thing, right? So even in payroll, and I actually started my career in payroll because my boss wanted me to get immersed in every area of the business, predicting where off-cycle transactions are going to come in because they can cause errors. Every area of HR, I think, lends itself to machine learning. And we've seen the beginning of it in use cases like predicting flight risk. But bear in mind, the big caution with any predictive model or algorithm is humans create it. Humans have biases. They have biases in the way it's constructed. The biases can rear their ugly head in the way data is interpreted. But putting those cautions aside, a lot of great work has happened in predicting flight risk and other aspects like will engagement trend up or down, because we've had some changes in the organization. And I will wrap it up with this slide. It's a journey, right? And just like it's a journey for a buyer, it's a journey for the employee. So this is my employee journey framework, and I'm not going to get into every stage, and not every employee goes through all stages. But to the extent that whether you're a vendor listening in or a customer or a prospective customer listening in, bear in mind that a good way to conceptualize what are the challenges, what are the needs, interests, and goals of an employee. Well, it depends on the stage or quasi-stage that they're in. Are they in those first few stages where they're getting socialized, getting immersed, and then just building out their repertoire of skills, addressing skill gaps? The stage in the journey that I like to focus on, and I think is a great opportunity for customers to take advantage of some of the technology out there that allows an employee to explore. Right? 9 is the exploration stage. If you don't allow employees the opportunity to see what's out there inside the organization, where are they going to go? They're going to leave. So again, that's why I found it handy to and useful to look at, what's operating with that employee in their head, what are the new challenges they're dealing with, and how can technology play a role. So that's it. And I think without further ado, we're going to go to some questions.
Steve, that was awesome. I really love the point about blaming the tech when it's actually more of a change management issue. I think that's a trap a lot of us have fallen into or seen happen. So that's a really great reminder to kind of start with, and at least to include that in your strategy section.
Yes. Thank you, Jess. Do we have?
We have. Yes, we have great questions coming in for you. I know we're very short on time, but I want to make sure that we get to a few of these before we wrap up. A reminder that if we don't get to your question today, Steve will get the chance to follow up with you. So keep those questions coming in. Steve, we had a few questions about, the size of the organization. And how much does that actually come into play when people are making these decisions? Or is it really more what you said at the start about knowing what your deliverables and dependencies are and kind of how you're approaching versus who you are?
So you're talking about it from the customer standpoint, I assume, yes? Or your questioner is talking about it from the... Yeah, well, it makes a difference because if the inner workings of your business are fairly complex and it requires some fairly, a lot of this has to do with to what degree are your processes in HR standardized? Are you doing some interesting things in recruiting or learning or different things in different parts of the world? Then the level of complexity is up there. Are you commingling employees and non-employees? Are you allowing shift workers to take different shifts or upskill to be eligible for a different shift? All of these kind of requirements can start to build on that complexity level. And then it's kind of like a cascading thing. The more complexity, the more you're going to need a system that handles complexity, and then the change management and the dependencies will correspondingly rise, if that makes sense. So a large organization, it's not that different from a small organization. It's really, I'd rather characterize it as fairly complex and non-standard processes or straightforward processes as opposed to large and small organizations. Does that make sense?
I like that a lot, focusing on the complexity of your needs and your asks versus necessarily the size. So for an organization that's maybe just starting to jump into either scaling or innovating or potentially, starting fresh, is there a specific sort of inroad that you would recommend starting with? We had some questions about whether or not the emphasis should be placed on technology that maybe automates processes versus technologies that are storing data and providing reporting capabilities. Where's the good starting point?
Yeah, I think you have to look holistically at this. And frankly, you bring up the word data. Data is really the lifeblood, obviously, of any HR technology asset, and so you need an airtight data model that's going to flex in different directions. As an example, what are all the ways that an employee delivers value? A lot of those ways can be outside their job, the confines of their job. They could be referring great candidates. They could be mentoring, coaching, suggesting ideas to the ops team. Is that being tracked anywhere? It should be. So that's a matter of flexing the data model. And I think a customer organization that wants to get the most ROI from these investments, they have to focus on data. They have to focus on data ownership. My teams had the most success when we got senior management to say everybody in the organization owns data. It's not the purview of HR, the exclusive purview of HR. Everybody owns data, and we need to have a mechanism for everybody to update it and certify it. Then we got real results. So you have to be on different tracks at the same time. Processes are the bread and butter of HR, but you have to look at the linkage between the processes as well, because there's logical ones and there's ones that are not intuitively obvious.
So let's talk about an organization that is looking to have it all. They want the data tracking. They want an HRIS, LMS, online learning system, payroll, all of it. Does that one single tool exist that's going to do all those things well, or are they building maybe a dashboard over top of many tools, or what do you suggest? Or it isn't one size fits all and it's different for every organization?
Yeah, there's an expression, age-old expression, horses for courses, and so it's not one vendor solution out there that's going to be best in every situation. It'll never happen. It's really the best in that operating context. That's why I kicked this talk off with kind of know thyself. But there's a couple of really kind of fundamental points here. One is you need a system of record. If you cannot track what's going on with an employee in their life cycle, you're not going to be able to do too much else. So you can have a talent management solution. It could be a best of breed. It could be a best of breed suite, but it needs to sit on top of a system of record. And then in terms of the evaluation of options out there with vendor solutions, it's going to take too long to kind of spit this out, but you have to think about the heritage of a vendor. How long have they been? If they're an integrated talent management vendor, they have 4 different pillars. They have recruiting and performance and learning and comp. Which one of those have they been in the longest? Because that's probably the side of the product that's the most mature. And they're probably, to some extent, playing catch up in the other areas. So, that's the best answer I can give in a short period of time. Heritage of the vendor is important. Not the be all and end all, but it's important.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's an important thing a lot of us often forget to think about. I have so many questions that I want to ask you, and we're really right at the top of the hour. I'm going to sneak in two more, I think, here. One, there's a really good question about aspirational versus where you are now versus the reality now. So when you're looking at these technologies, are you looking at what you need right now? Are you looking at where you want to be in 3 to 5 years? And I assume always, scalability is good, but not every tool or technology is going to fit how the evolution of a business might go. So how do you recommend planning for now or planning for the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think because of the cloud and the SaaS model, in terms of ensuring longer term alignment and fit with a particular vendor and solution, the pressure is not what it used to be because it's not as disruptive to swap in and swap out. And case in point is that 35-40% of customers polled typically say in the next year or so we're looking to change. It doesn't mean that one is much better than the other. Again, it means that there's a perception that the operating context makes it a closer fit. And also, the vendor might not be doing a stellar job of delivering a real effective customer success program where they really understand what that customer is trying to achieve and bringing them into the fold on input to the roadmap, dealing with other customers that are like customers, exchanging ideas. Customer success is a huge deal, and it's 10 times broader in scope than customer support. So that's my answer there for now.
That's a great, I love, the customer success versus customer support. And so the good news is that you don't have to choose anymore thanks to some of the innovations we've seen between planning for the here and now and planning for the future. My last question for you, Steve, and I wish we could keep going, but as everyone walks away from this session today, what is the one thing that you want everyone to know or to be asking themselves?
Just to reinforce and reiterate the point about knowing the dependencies. Know thyself, know thy operating context, and know the dependencies. And if you're going to shortchange the dependencies, you're also not going to be getting the ROI that you hope to get. So there's a clear correlation between sophistication, innovation, and degree of dependencies that have to be accounted for if you want to take advantage of the sophistication and the innovation. And I tried to cover it. That one slide that had 12 or so boxes: program management, vendor management, data quality, change management. I'm not just throwing up words there. That's based on living it, being in the trenches, and saying, if we don't get this right, and then the ROI is not going to be there.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Steve, this has just been amazing content. I know everyone out there right now has follow-up questions and wants to reach out to you. If someone wants to get in touch, how can they reach out?
I think there's a connect with Steve Goldberg on the left there, right? So isn't that about it? Yeah. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to know what you thought, and if I can answer any of your questions, I will try hard to do so. I'll be on a pretty long flight. Next Friday, I'm going to Asia, so I'll have time to get to some comments and questions. But I want to sincerely thank Actual Tech Media, and I want to thank everybody that joined. Thank you so much, and I'm sure I know some of the folks that are out there, so stay well. Everybody, stay well.
Thanks, Steve. And I'd really like to echo that. A special thank you to everyone that asked some incredible questions today. It's just been such a pleasure. And this has been a really fun discussion. I've seen some exciting questions come in, and I can tell that you guys are really interested in exploring this topic. So hopefully we will have the opportunity to dig in a little bit more. We're just a little short on time, so we're going to keep things moving along. Now, I know that a few of you out there are saying, hey, you mentioned prizes at the top. Let's get to that. So a quick reminder that you must be in attendance here at the live webinar to win. And today's winner of a $300 Amazon gift card is, I always feel like I should drum roll, Rosie Padilla from California. Rosie Padilla or Padilla from California. Congratulations, Rosie. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. And I do want to remind you all that there's still a chance to win that $50 Amazon gift card for the best question asked. I can tell you the race is very tight. Amazing questions coming in. We will review all of them after the webinar today, and we will follow up with that winner. And folks, that's it. I can't believe that we're done already. The last hour has honestly just flown by, but here we are. And on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to again thank Steve for an absolutely fascinating presentation. I always say at the wrap that I love when I get maybe one or two of those kind of brain buzzing moments in a webinar, and this one was full of them. It was brain buzzing everywhere. And a big part of the fun today has been all the questions asked. So sending huge high fives and special thank yous to all of you for attending and asking those awesome questions about what's top of mind in HR technologies in your organizations. Webinars like this one are just so wonderful to be a part of because they really do give us the opportunity to connect with one another, to explore these new ideas and kind of take apart all these innovative new trends together. So I know I've had a wonderful time chatting with all of you. I can't wait to see you all again soon. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful